So, um, this I see what you're saying, but again, this doesn't really address the question I asked. So, if the resurrection is true, then what, like, our concerns, do they still matter with the truth of Christianity? Because, like, ultimately, what everything falls on is okay. And sorry, I'm multitasking here. My YouTube crowd can't hear me, so I'm trying to readjust this. Good old sound. But anyways, if the uh, um, if the resurrection is true, if the claim of Christianity, which is the resurrection, is true, even if we have worries about them, like why would God do something like this? Why does it have to be like that? Then that doesn't come into whether Christianity is true or not. We then have to ask the question. So, I guess my question to you is: do you think that there's enough evidence to convince that the resurrection happened? Is that an issue for you, or is it merely just the methodology issue? Because God can't die. Okay, so because God should, by definition, shouldn't be able to die, can't cease to exist, right? Okay, are you familiar with the doctrine of the hypostatic union? Sure. Uh, right, right. So this is the doctrine that came up um, to kind of understand how Jesus can be God and man. Like, how can that make sense without running into some form of logical contradiction or violating the law of identity? And so this was developed through the early ecumenical councils. I can't. I know the Council of Nicaea definitely talked about the divinity of Christ. I'm not sure if this is where they exactly established the hypostatic union, but nonetheless, this means that God is both 100% man and 100%. So has God, Jesus takes part, the person of Jesus. First, you have to understand the Trinity. The Trinity is one divine nature and three persons partaking in that divine nature. So the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Son, in the instance of the hypostatic union, the reason it's called hypostatic union is hypostases is the term that's used for uh, like multiple persons, right? Three hypostases, one homoousia. In this case, the hypostatic union is you have two persons, this divine person and then a human person unified. So they both have each nature unified in one. Now, Paul uses language in the New Testament that basically describes the Son giving up divine authority to an extent, maybe some divine power in order to take on flesh, to fully experience flesh. That's a different argument in and of itself. But the purpose of the hypostatic union is to justify this doctrine, is to show that Jesus can die, the man nature can die, but not the divine nature. So the divine nature, the divine person partaking in the divine nature, the Son, did not die, whereas the human aspect did. So God did not die. That problem doesn't actually happen. It's merely the flesh that dies. Well, Jesus originally is not human, right? This is only once the incarnation takes place. So at point of incarnation, yes. Th- Correct. And this is, mind you, I can expand on this, but no, no. See, that's the very. So that's why I said he's fully God and fully human. So it's not half and half. hmm This. That's why they had a whole council over this back in the 4th century. hmm 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 Yeah, demigod. Mm-hmm. Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Hold on a sec. I'm having more sound issues on YouTube, but I did hear what you said. So basically, am I just going to be dead? See, the problem is Hercules is a demigod. Hercules is half human, half man. So, um, even the way the Greeks created Hercules in general, um, even the way he's drafted, in Greek mythology, it's not comparable. It's not analogous to Jesus. Jesus in Christian theology is going to be an actual like God in the sense of. So I don't know how are you familiar with Greek mythology and like how the Greek. Uh, okay. Uh-huh.
He's capable of doing anything according to you, why does he have to A, die in the first place? B, why does he have to does he, when he closes his eyes, does he like, is he choosing to stay asleep, and is he watching, he can open his eyes anytime and say, hey guys, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. No, I see
Or
what you're
is he
saying.
is he in there like that? Obviously, is he choosing, like a god can't, this doesn't work for a god, because if God loses control of his body, then he's not all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a Hercules. But if he is all powerful and he still has control over his body, he was in there the whole time and suffering the cross and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he just pretending?
Uh, Pretending to die? Is that what you're saying? Pretending to
Pretending to be
suffer?
dead, pretending to be suffering on the cross,
No,
pretending all
no.
these things.
That's part of him being fully human and experiencing what a human experience would have been on the cross. That was the purpose.
So did he lose control of his body when he died?
When you say he lose, so his human nature, his human aspect died. Like, so from a human perspective, yes. Now he submitted his divine nature. He's still, that's still there, but his divine personhood, in at least my form of the Trinity, others may disagree. This is actually the original Trinitarian view, and this is directly important to this. The Son is not subordinate to the Father ontologically, but relationally. So what does that mean? The Father's will was for the Son to die on the cross in order for this atonement action to happen. In order for this whole piece of the puzzle to fit, this had to happen. This is the way to build the bridge so man could then commune with God
But
in
it
the
means
sense that God is
nothing.
hope.
But
No,
it
this
means
is
nothing.
directly related. You have to let me finish. So if the will of
Oh,
the
sorry. I
Father,
didn't mean it like that. I meant it in another way. But carry on.
okay, what I'm saying is if the will of the Father is for the Son to withhold himself from doing anything, from bringing down the angels and stopping this from happening, then that's what the Son is going to do. And so it's not that the Son lost control of his body from the divine person could not do anything to his body. He chose not to. And he chose to follow the will of the Father.
So he was choosing to be dead in the body.
He chose to follow the
He
will of
did
the
have
Father,
control.
which means he did
And he
not
did have
override.
control. He could have awakened at any time, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So was he truly dead? Or was he just, look,
Yes.
okay, if I just close my
Yes,
eyes
he
right
was
now,
dead.
I died,
The
and I wake up and I
human,
come back.
yes, the
Did I
human
die?
nature was dead, or the human person was dead.
Dude, pretend to be dead for like 5 seconds for me.
Uh, I mean, I could pretend, but what's that going to accomplish?
Just close your eyes for 5 seconds, bro.
What's that going to accomplish?
I just want to see what it looks like.
Okay.
Please.
That's kind of weird.
Come
I'm
on,
not going
man.
to do
It's
that.
TikTok. Let's keep it light.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. It's kind of weird.
Pretend to be dead for me. Your camera's on.
Okay, I'm doing it right now, pretending to be dead.
Okay,
Oh, I'm
great.
alive. There we go. Okay, what did that accomplish?
Okay, bro, thank you so much. Was that what Jesus was doing?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I
Did
don't.
he truly
This is
die then?
this. If it seems to me, is this seriously your objection to Christianity?
I think gods can't die, bro. Come on.
I agree.
Especially if they can choose to wake up, then they never truly died.
I agree. God, by definition, cannot cease to exist. Yes.
But you're saying
That's
Jesus
why
is
I
fully
explained the hypostatic union, and you just like totally skipped over that.
God.
So the human died, not God, not the divine nature. So the divine person, so there's technically two persons here as one, fully human, fully God. The fully human part died. The fully God part did not. So no, God did not die.
Was Jesus in there pretending to be dead and could have awoken at any time?
The human body was dead.
But he could have woken up at any
The
time,
human
right?
body was lifeless. From a logical perspective, I'm sure he could have. Yes. But that doesn't
So
mean that
he
he's
had
going to,
control the
because
whole time.
the
Sir,
Father's
how
will.
do you define death?
Well, I guess you could say, from a physical perspective, the physical
For
body.
every perspective, death of a universe, death of anything.
Well, no, because that's the death of the universe is kind of colloquial. Because it's possible,
Okay,
like
a death of a human, how would you define that?
right. So the death of a human would be for the body to cease to function. And I'm trying to think of like a proper definition. Because the whole soul leaving the body thing, that's actually not accurate. That is a Gnostic view that a lot of Christians are confused with. Essentially, like the body is ceasing to function
I
in
would
a
say
living
you
manner.
lose control over all your bodily functions, and
You could be
you
alive
can't.
and lose control over your bodily functions, though.
Well, not your heart, not your vital, all your bodily functions. Then you lose control of everything in your body. Correct? That's death.
Physical death. We'll go with that. Yeah.
Just death.
Well, there's a difference between like physical death and spiritual death, or something like that.
We only know one way that's true to die.
No, there's a lot of people that would disagree with you there.
You
There's a whole
can't measure
camp of
the
people called
spiritual death.
annihilationists who think that your soul can be annihilated. So,
Brother, you can't measure your soul after it leaves the body.
how is that relevant? Because
Let's
I
talk in
can't
real life
physically
terms.
measure it, therefore it's not true. I mean, that's some empiricist nonsense.
Back to the point.
What was the point?
Gods can't die.
I agree. I don't see where
Then
the
we're on the
issue
same
is here.
page. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, but your whole Christianity is about Jesus died for your sins.
Yes. The Son, the divine person, the Son, did not die in the sense of God did not die. The human body of Jesus died. Yes. So in that hypostatic union, that union ceased, that part of the union, the one side of the union, the human side died. But that doesn't mean that God died. God experienced human death and suffering.
Did he lose control over his body?
We already went over this, man.
Yes or no?
We already went over this. When you say lose control, the human part of him did, yes.
No, I mean, okay, but say his divine nature is in there.
The divine nature,
could choose to
I don't have
awaken
a
at any
reason to
point,
believe
correct?
that the divine nature chose, couldn't choose otherwise. I think that's part of the submission to the Father. That's why God like Jesus talks about submitting to the Father, submitting to your will be done.
So,
So it was
so
voluntary.
your God has
Yes.
a hierarchy.
Yes. In a
This is
sense, it's
paganism,
called.
brother.
No, it's not. That's the original formulation of the Trinity. It's called the monarchical Trinitarian model, where the Father is the monarch of the
Brother, this
Trinity.
can't be true. This I thought they were co-equal. Brother, this sounds
They
like
they
paganism.
are in an ontological sense. Yes, they all partake in the same divine nature. That's
Brother,
why I literally
can I
said
tell you
earlier
something?
that the Son is not ontologically subordinate, relationally subordinate. There's a difference.
Brother, your God has a hierarchy. But anyway, can I tell you something?
Okay.
In the Hindu scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
there is something called Trimurti. Do you know it?
Mm-mm. Nope.
Okay. Is the word Trinity or the definition of Trinity in your Bible?
The word Trinity is not in the Bible. I would say the definition or the model of the Trinity is in the Bible. That's how we derive it.
Okay, is it there verbatim? It's just not, is
No,
it?
it's not there verbatim, but if that's what you're
Okay, so
expecting, that's
everyone would have to jump to
fallacious, right?
conclusions. I feel like some random person in the middle of the ocean in North Sentinel Island with a
Mm-hmm.
Bible would not be able to figure out the Trinity
Why?
from reading the whole Bible.
Why?
Because, brother, because I've seen it.
Well, the majority of the history of the church did, so why couldn't that person?
Because there's nothing that explains a triune God in the Bible.
Sure, there is. That's
Like
the
in a
Trinity is
simple
not
kind of
just a
manner.
made up,
In a
man-made
simple kind
doctrine.
of manner, like
It comes from Scripture.
it doesn't come from there.
So how
The
is it that
God
we
system
have?
in Trinity.
Well, hold on. You're going to have to answer some questions now. So
Okay.
we see Jesus declared to be God. We see Jesus referred to as God. We see Jesus refer to the Father as God. And then we also see Jesus refer to the Holy Spirit as part of him, as co-equal with him. If we look at the end of Matthew 28, he commands them, he says after the resurrection, to baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he's putting them on the same pedestal. Why would that be? What's the explanation there?
Okay, so now you're telling me that one God puts another God on a pedestal.
So you're using bad philosophy in your language. You're assuming tritheism in your language when I'm stating a monotheistic form of the Trinity. So the way the Trinity is, there's one divine nature. Okay? So that's when you say God, there are two ways to use the word God. The one way is to use God in the sense of a name, like the nominal way, like if I'm saying, "Hey God, how are you?" Traditionally, when you're saying God in the nominal sense, you're referring to the Father. That's from a name sense, you're referring to the Father. Now, if you're saying God in the predicate sense, right? That could be referring to the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit, because they are all part of the divine nature. They all partake. They all have that same divine nature, but they are three persons, divine persons within that divine nature. So let me give you an analogy that might help break this down. So imagine, what was your name? Your name is Kay. Okay, so Kay, you want me to call you Kay, right? That's your name on TikTok. Hello?
Hey, sorry, please carry on, carry on.
Okay, so let's say Kay, you, myself, my name's Adam, and then we have someone else named Charles with us, right? If we're all standing in a circle, hanging out or whatever, we have three human persons, and we all share one human nature. None of us have a different nature. We share the same nature. We all have one human nature. But there are three human persons that share that nature. That's the same type of relationship that the three divine persons have with the one divine nature. So when we say God in the sense of a predicate, we're referring to the three persons. But when you use God in the sense of a name, in the nominal sense, you are referring to the Father. That's where we get a lot of confusion. If you read the Second Council, Ecumenical Council, which is Council of Constantinople, that will break this down quite a bit. Actually, it's the Council of Chalcedon that does the hypostatic union. But anyways, if I were you, if this is confusing you, if this truly is a stumbling block for you, I offer you two solutions. Number one, read the Council of Nicaea, read the Council of Chalcedon, and lastly, the one I just talked about, the Council of Constantinople. These are the first three ecumenical councils that the early church fathers did. They met together and discussed this because of how this can be confusing. I get it. Like, there's no way around it. That's why it was so, that's why it took some work to kind of understand this. And obviously this is going to be through divine revelation as well, coming from Scripture. So that's my first solution, is read those fathers, read what they wrote on those councils, read other scholars that can translate it into a more English sense. Because there are words like, for example, homoousias or hypostasis. The best word to translate to the English language is person, but some people don't even think that that's a good translation because it'll run into problems of confusion. The second solution I would have is, okay, whatever. Now, I don't agree with this, but you can just not believe in the Trinity and just be a Unitarian. I don't think that Unitarians are going to hell necessarily. I think they're wrong. I think their theology is wrong. But if you can still submit your life to Christ and be a Bible-believing Christian, and the most important part, again, submitting your life to Christ while being a Unitarian, I mean, God knows your heart. So I don't think God is going to throw you in hell if you are earnestly trying to find God and you just don't think that's what Scripture says.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I've learned a lot from what you said.
Happy to
And I
help.
understand I've got a lot of reading to do too.
So do I. So do I, my friend. We all do. But that's, like I said, I think those two solutions would be the best thing for you. And I'd be curious, after digging a bit in either direction to, come back and have a chat. I'm curious. Because if that's what's holding you back, man, from coming to Christ, by all means, give it a shot.
Yeah, so I want to talk about all sorts of godlike conundrums that come up because I'm quite a skeptic in a lot of them.
Okay. I do
So
have a
yeah,
couple of guests
keep
that
in
have been
touch.
waiting. So if you want, send me a message, DM me or whatever. Or I don't have as much of a. I'm not going to be on as long today as I normally am, but I'll get on next Friday. I do have a conversation that I'm going to be talking with this gentleman. His name is oh gosh, he's a skeptic here on YouTube. But after he and I chat for a bit, I might be able to take some guests then. And feel free, if you ever have any questions, no matter how tough they may sound, how rigorous, whatever, let me know, man. I'm happy to help.
Okay, but you have to teach me more about the Bible. That's the deal.
Okay, I'll teach you what I can.
You have to. I want to learn it from the source.
Okay. Well, I'm not the source. The Bible's the source, but I'm happy to go through any scriptural questions that you have. Send them my way. Feel free to come back anytime.
I
Okay.
also want to know what are the kind of bigger conundrums that had to have councils and stuff like this to figure out. Because you are quite honest. I want to know more about the different ones.
So those were the first three. Then you had a couple of other, like, the reason the councils came up is because you had people within the church community start to question these doctrines because they either didn't understand them or there just seemed to be other possible scenarios. And then there were also heretics that were coming about trying to start new religions and new doctrines. All of the councils are answering this basic question. The question of God asking, "Who do you say that I am?" That's pretty much what all of the councils are answering. The first one talks about whether Jesus is God, Jesus is divine. The second one is going to talk about the doctrine of the Trinity itself, how the Trinity is formulated. The third one is going to talk about the hypostatic union that you and I talked about. I'm not as familiar with Nicaea II and Chalcedon and Constantinople II. Then the last one is about the icons and iconography. And the book that I showed earlier has John of Damascus. I think he's the main guy who was arguing for, or maybe that was Maximus the Confessor. They're arguing for the pro side of icons and how it's holy to have icons and it's okay to kiss them and things like that. Yeah, it's John of Damascus, Carter. Yeah, you're right. So but the first three are the most important to me. I think they're all important, but the first three, and then some of them are actually still kind of going back to the original issues discussed and fighting off other later heresies that kind of come about throughout the times. This was starting in the 4th century up to the 8th century, 7th or 8th century. So it's a long time ago, but these are going to be things, and what's really neat about reading the early church fathers is they have, especially the really early ones, a lot of them speak Greek, and they're in the context of the original language of the New Testament. So they can give us further context on things that may not translate well to modern culture and to modern language. That's pretty helpful. They can expand on these types of things. But yeah.
Yeah, I see. Thanks.
Sure,
It's
man.
very interesting now. And I feel like, yeah, if you do go a bit further back, you do get more intricate literary works.
Mm-hmm.
But, you do also argue God exists. What are your best arguments for that?
Well, I want to get to my next guest before I get into that. But hey, if they're a skeptic, they'll probably ask me that, and feel free to listen. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds calm to me.
Okay.
Go, I'll let somebody else come up.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Kay. I appreciate it. And I'll see you when you come back. Feel free to send me any questions through DM, okay?
I will do, man. Thanks.
All right, have a good night. Take care. Alrighty, good conversation. So I don't remember if heroism or Grant was first. On my list, it's heroism. So I am bringing you up.
Oops. Okay. Hello?
Hey, heroism. How old are you?
31.
Perfect. Alrighty. What did you want to talk about today?
So are you fine talking to a fellow believer?
For a little bit, yeah. What's up?
Okay, that's fine. Because if you don't mind, because the thing you guys were talking about, the Trinity, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit so people can understand why biblically we can trust. Because one thing that he said that I disagree with was if you put a Christian in the middle of the ocean with just the Bible, they could never believe in the Trinity. When you read Corinthians, the beginning where we get all our knowledge from as Christians, yes, we have people teach us, but we know that the Bible teaches the Holy Spirit that is our teacher. So that's one, I just wanted to add that. But the reason biblically why we believe in the Trinity is the Bible teaches, as you were beautifully articulating, there is one God, Deuteronomy 6:4, Romans 3:30. But the Bible also teaches the three persons interacting, and they call them all God. We see that the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. We see, like at one point, I think John 12 or John 14, Jesus plainly says, Father, glorify thy name. And then the Father says, I have glorified it. Mm-hmm. So just to get us starting, what are some passages, if you don't mind going this out, what's some passage you like to show people the Trinity from scriptures? I know you quoted Matthew 28:19. What's some other ones you like?
That's probably my favorite one because it's clearly all three of them on the same pedestal. I can't remember the exact passage, but where Jesus specifically mentions the helper he's going to send. Mm-hmm. That's going to do works like healing. That seems pretty incredible for a non-God to be able to do things like that. Yes. Pretty much the go-tos in the book of John 1, the entire chapter. It's a beautiful philosophical grounding for Jesus being God along with the Father. And then just the different passages where Jesus says, things. There's some of them that are kind of hidden. For example, the Greek word ego ami, or the phrase ego ami, means I am. And Jesus says this in John 8. Everyone recognizes this before Abraham was, I am. Right? That's like the most obvious one. But there's actually one that people kind of sleep on when the boat is rocking during the storm, right? And Jesus appears to them, and he says, in some translations, you'll actually see a better version, I think, where it says, behold, it is I, right? And the Greek words, again, ego ami. It's the same word that he uses in John 8. He's actually claiming to deity. If you read throughout the Old Testament, you'll see who has the power over storms, who has the power over the sea. Only God.
Yes.
And you see this in Isaiah 45. That you'll see a direct connection to that. Another one is where Jesus says to hate your family for him. And a lot of people are like, well, why would you say that? And they don't even realize that, and this is in the Synoptic Gospels, right? So
yes.
Right? Who comes before your family? There's only one thing.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. You're absolutely right. So many people don't understand what Jesus is saying there, because he earlier had said, love thy neighbor as thyself. And he quoted, honor thy father and mother. It's clear Jesus did not mean hate your mother and father. Another one that goes good, if you like Matthew 28:19, if you don't, do you have your Bible with you? It's another one similar to Matthew 28. Yeah. I'll if you don't mind reading it for the chat and such. It's another one where it references all three of the Trinity. It's 2 Corinthians 13:14.
I think I know what you're talking about. Let me read that.
Yeah, because like I said, because you would agree, all of our beliefs, because yes, the councils have helped and everything, but you would agree everything we believe isn't because of the councils, it's because God's word had already said it. Yes. So,
yeah.
Because you've run into some people, they put so much faith in the councils that they forget, no, it's God's word we trust in. The councils, yes, they help defend the faith, but the word of God is more important than any council.
Correct. I am a Protestant, so yes, sola scriptura. All right, so you said 2 Corinthians 13 what?
14, just to kind of for everybody, so they can see another one. If everyone loves Matthew 28, and I love it too, because we see the baptism formula as well. But this is another verse for anyone that wants to see another the three persons.
Yes. Okay. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Boom. That's it, man.
Yes.
Why do I not have that in my go-to? Yeah.
And then if we can do one more real quick, if you don't mind. This one is just the one I referenced earlier, because I often ask people, if you don't mind, and then I'll draw, because you have other guests. Yeah, the one I referenced in John, if you don't mind, real quick, because.
In John, you said? Yeah,
John. It's either John 12, because Jesus plainly, you're gonna see. Yeah, let me see. It's either John 12 or John 14. Give me 1 second. I might. Yeah, sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, I know it's in John. Is it John? All right. Let me just look it up real quick. I know it's in John. Sorry.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
well, there's a lot of them in John, but yeah.
Yes, it's where Jesus says, "Father, glorify thy name." That's the part of the verse, and then the voice comes from heaven.
I think that's. I want to say that is in 14, oneness with the Father.
Yes.
I mean, if I just start at verse 7. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also.
One.
Oh, okay.
But on that one, if you read later, you'll see Jesus. For anybody that throws John
against Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah, because a lot of people try to use that against us. They try to say, like the modalists, they try to say Jesus is saying he's the Father there.
Yeah.
But you know how when you read later in John 14, like, let's see, is it 23 or 20? Yeah, Jesus says we in John 14, 23, he uses us and our will make our abode. But give me 1 second, then I'll get the verse. And like I said, this will be the last thing I want to show.
I got you.
And I appreciate you.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, it's John 12, 28 through 30. Yep, here we go. Yeah. John.
Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came out of heaven. I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. So the Lord who stood by it and heard were saying that it had thundered, and the others were saying, an angel had spoken to him. Jesus responded and said, this voice has not come for my sake, but for yours. Now judgment is upon this world, and now the ruler of this world will be cast out. Talking about himself. Or talking about Satan.
Yeah.
And if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. So yeah, that's a pretty
And
deity-ish claim there, if you ask me.
yes, and it's clear that it couldn't be an angel saying it. And when I read it, the voice came for us. I like to see, it's clear, it's clear we're seeing the Trinity on full display there. People often try to say, "Oh, where's the Holy Spirit in this?" But like you already quoted Matthew 28, Jesus put the Holy Spirit on the same level. You go all the way, the Spirit moved Genesis 1. And that's the other thing, real quick. I'll say this and then I'll drop. The Holy Trinity is just as much in the Old Testament. It's more you have to search it. The New Testament more fully displayed, but the Old Testament, Genesis 1:1, you go to the original Hebrew, they use Elohim, showing plurality. But then by the time you get to Genesis 1:27, you have it clarified, plural and one God. So thanks for having me up. I just wanted you don't get to talk to too many people that understand the Trinity where you can have a quick little study together. So may God bless you guys, and I'll see you again, my friend.
Hey, you too, man. Appreciate the love, man. You're welcome back anytime. Alrighty. Cool. Let me, I see you in there, Grant. I'll bring you up here in a second. Let me just talk to my chat here. First, the YouTube chat. I apologize for the sound issues in the beginning. OBS was, I don't know why it doesn't save my settings and it changes them. It's really weird. But anyways, I wanted, Arctic Truck, you brought up, bring Dalton, the Bible guy, on since you talked to Kentucky Atheist. I feel like I've talked to Dalton before, but maybe not. And what's up, Epic Farming? That name sounds really familiar. I think he has a TikTok, and I'm pretty sure I've talked to him before, but I could be mistaken. But feel free to send him my way, share the live with him, and bring him over. Happy to talk. All right, let's see. All right, so we got Grant here. Go ahead and bring Grant up.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Grant?
It's going good. Before
Cool.
we get into the things I mainly wanted to ask about,
Mhm.
I wanted to, I guess, ask a question about the Trinity. It goes back to something you said in the conversation before
Sure.
heroism. You said something along the lines of that God's nature or godness, something like that, is a similar situation to if three people were standing together and they share a human nature. I just sort of feel like that is confusing to me. I feel like when I was a Christian, that's not something I would have thought was the correct interpretation of the Trinity, for the reason that, like, if we had three members of the pantheon, the ancient Greek pantheon, and they were the three people standing together instead of three humans, and you might say, oh, well, they share one God nature between them, but there's three of them because they're a pantheistic religion, or they believe that there are multiple gods. But obviously, you would be in the monotheistic camp, and that doesn't really seem to mesh well.
Sure.
I'm not going to give you too hard of a time no matter what you answer, but I just want to give you the opportunity to clarify.
Yeah, so a lot of it's going to boil down to metaphysics. So the early church was very much committed to metaphysical realism, which I am as well. The majority of modern folk, particularly modern Christians, and this goes back to like William of Ockham, the guy who Occam's razor is named after. He's a 12th or 13th century medieval scholar and Christian. He didn't like realism. And so what is realism, right? Realism is the notion in metaphysics that forms and structures are real, and that this thing, human nature, is an actual form. Human personhood is a real thing. Two-ness is real. Redness is a real form or structure, right? Or human would be like a true genera, is the term that Aristotle uses. So Gregory of Nyssa answers this question. He's a church father from the Second Council, very well known. And he answers this question. Somebody says, well, how come, like, it seems like if there's Bill, Joe, and Bob, that's three humans. So if there's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, isn't there three gods? And so that's where he corrects him and says, no, that's a mistake in metaphysics. So the form of human nature, we all partake in. We don't have different natures. We all have the same nature. We share that.
Mm-hmm.
But the personhood is where the difference is. So we all are our own unique persons that share the same nature. So from the metaphysics perspective, the form of nature and then the form of person are not the same. They're different. So when you say the term human, and humans, plural, what you're actually doing is using a shortened, like the full phrase should be human persons, just like with God should be divine persons. So that's where the difference is. It gets into a little bit deeper metaphysics, but that's really where the difference is. And I'm assuming, what type of church did you grow up in?
Oh boy. We're just Protestant in general is the best I could really say.
Okay. So most Protestants today are not, well, actually, that's starting to change, but as of like 2 years ago and prior, most Protestants were going to affirm some more modern Latin form of Trinity, whether it's like a social Trinitarian model, which is, I think, what William Lane Craig pushes, or the Thomistic point, which would be a Latin Trinitarian model, where they kind of start to change. They say things like identity becomes transitive, and so that's how they get around things like violating the law of identity, and they have their a different view where there's no monarch in the Trinity, things like that. So that's probably where the confusion comes, and a lot of Protestant churches just don't follow what the original Trinitarian. A lot of them don't care. They think that that's like a tertiary issue that's not that important. You just need to know Father, Son, and Spirit, one God. That's all you need to know. And they don't teach you the metaphysics behind it or the reasoning behind the church fathers and what's the best examination of Scripture. So anyways, we could go on about that, but it's more or less just most people are not aware of what the historical
Okay.
understanding of the Trinity is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I really understand your explanation all that much, if I'm being honest, but I think I'm okay with that. I'm not going to press too much more into it because, yeah, I really want to give you the opportunity to set the course of the direction. I'm sort of here to have my beliefs challenged, to get uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I would say, I would hope. The main thing that keeps on bugging me, the reason I left the faith is because I have the conviction that Christianity doesn't meet its burden of proof. I feel like you should have to establish that there is a God, that Jesus rose from the dead and things along those lines. I don't think you meet that, at least not to a level that I would feel like should be expected if I'm going to become a follower of this religion. So I probably will keep on coming back to that evidential standard, but I also expect you might want to negotiate that evidential standard, and that could be a fun topic of conversation. So, yeah, I don't
Okay.
believe in God, and I don't believe in Christianity, Jesus. So, what direction would you like to take?
Well, I am more of a classical apologist, so I usually try to take the route of starting with the first line: Does God exist? Because if God doesn't exist, then miracles are even less likely. And something like a resurrection doesn't really have any merit to it if God doesn't exist. So,
That's true.
I guess, do you think, are you an atheist?
I'm an atheist, is what I would call myself, but I'm going to be more explicit than that. I don't have any strong position on whether there is or there is not a God, so I can't prove to you that there is no God. But I also feel like, also for the God claim, there is a burden of proof in order to figure out, in order to positively say that there is a God. And I don't think that's been met. So in that sense, I'm an atheist, but you could call me an agnostic.
Okay. So, like, if I were to make the claim, God does not exist, do you think I have a burden of proof?
Uh, yeah,
Okay. So then you would really, in in the truest sense, you would be an agnostic because you don't swing one way or
yeah,
the other.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
waiting to be convinced one way or the other.
Uh,
Okay,
yes.
gotcha. So I think that theism better explains reality than naturalism. You don't have to be a naturalist as an atheist, but I find that a lot of the non-naturalist atheist positions are just like very strange. There are some that aren't as bad, but usually, like, for example, I'll give you one. Michael Huemer, he's an ethics philosopher who does a little bit of stuff in philosophy of religion. He's an atheist, but he believes in the soul, right? He
Okay.
thinks that we have souls. And I think that that's kind of strange. And the reason he believes in souls is because he thinks that better explains things like consciousness. And I think his philosophy of mind view ties into having a soul better than not. And that's why he chooses to believe in the soul, but he's a naturalist.
Hmm.
So it's I'm sorry, but he's an atheist. So you don't believe in the supernatural, but you believe in this metaphysical thing called the soul, that is eternal.
Pretty weird.
Right. So whereas human beings, right, we're, if from a naturalist perspective, we're just flesh, we're just physical. So I think that from all aspects,
I'm inclined to agree with that.
right. So I think that theism is going to better explain the bigger questions to reality. And so, and this isn't just like posting things ad hoc. I think we can compare the two fair from an agnostic position. So the typical route I go is like it's a more of a design style argument, but from a Bayesian approach. Okay. So let's look at the naturalistic hypothesis versus the theistic hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis I'm going to use here is a classical theistic hypothesis. What does that mean? God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. Okay. I can further expand on that if you'd like, but I don't think it's necessary at this moment. So let's compare the two. So let's look at something like our universe, which is life permitting. Though we don't have reason to believe that there's life beyond Earth per se, we obviously do for Earth. We see life here, unless we're all just living in a simulation. But nonetheless, we have a reason to believe that this is a life-permitting universe because we see life around us. So, would we bet more? What are the reasons we would expect a life-permitting universe under naturalism?
Well, if we were in a universe that was not life permitting and it was a naturalistic universe, then we wouldn't really be there in order to tell that, there was or wasn't a universe. So I feel like you have to eliminate all of the scenarios where naturalism would exist, but life existence would not exist in that universe. So I don't really know how neatly that maps.
So basically, what I'm getting at is there is no, and philosophers of religion will agree, there is no explanation that you can give under naturalism to expect a life-permitting universe, because the probability of a life-permitting universe and a non-life-permitting universe, like there's no reason to expect a life-permitting universe over a non-life-permitting universe under naturalism. It's just the best thing you could do is appeal to a brute fact, and that just means that there is no explanation. That's what a brute fact means. Whereas under theism, under the specific model that I gave, it probably works under others too, but in the one that I gave, we would expect there to be a life-permitting universe, because if God is good, right, that's what omnibenevolent would mean, the maximal amount of good, then there would be more good that comes out of creating a universe with life than without life. Because life is capable of evolving, or life is capable of being as moral persons, moral, distinct, rational beings that can make moral choices and make moral goods, right? So life itself is good. Things existing as opposed to not existing would be good. And then the addition on top of that is beings that are capable of doing good things, like showing virtue, things like that. So a god, a theistic god, a theistic hypothesis, we can give explanations to increase a neutral position to you can add to that probability either through a prior probability method or posterior. Again, I'm getting the Are You Here notification. Hold on. TikTok always acts like I'm not here. It makes me do this puzzle thing. But anyways, so with that being said, we can increase. We have reasons to believe that there would be a life-permitting universe under theism.
I would agree with that.
But we don't under naturalism. So why would I take naturalism over theism?
Maybe if I formulate it this way, this will help me to understand what you're saying, the problem with what I would sort of naturally assume would be. Uh, if we take all of the worlds, hold on. So you phrased it as, let me make sure I can get this right. There might be a lot of repeating in this conversation where I try to repeat back what you said and formulate it in a way that makes sense to me.
That's fine.
Let's see here. So you say, what should we expect in a theistic universe? And life permission just sort of would be one of those things, and I would agree with that.
But, well, no. The condition that we're trying to discover, like we're trying to inquire on, is a life-permitting universe. And so the
Okay.
question is, which hypothesis offers explanations that we can increase? So if we're starting from a neutral position, 50%,
Uh-huh.
50%, 50-50, how can we increase the probability under naturalism? The way to do that is by offering explanations that are going to raise our intuitions or raise the probability. We don't have an option there with naturalism, but we do with theism. So if we've raised the probability some way or another, whether you're willing to grant from a 0.5 to a 0.6 or a 0.5 to a 0.500000001, it doesn't matter. We've still made theism more probable than naturalism. And so the question is, if theism is more probable than naturalism, given a life-permitting universe, we see that there's a life-permitting universe. So the question is, either A, do we deny that there's a life-permitting universe and say this is all, just a simulation, or B, do we say if you don't do that, then we have to say, okay, well, why would I take the less probable over the more probable hypothesis?
I would say I'm not going to deny that life exists in the universe, but I'm not entirely sure yet that theism does have more explanatory power in that way. So let me still try to formulate this something so I can make sure I get this clear.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we start with naturalism and theism. We observe that the world is life permitting, and then we try to take which one of these explains that better. I feel like that's sort of strange because why can't we just incorporate the premise that the universe is life permitting into naturalism? Like, we're already at the point where life exists. If we were ever at a point where life couldn't exist, or we were in a non-life permitting universe, then we wouldn't be able to create any sort of assessment. So I feel like it just, I'm not sure that.
Well,
Let's
so
see, I might need some time to process it.
because it seems like you might be leaning towards the anthropic principle argument.
I've
um,
heard that before. That
but
sounds familiar.
that's not really going to get us anywhere here. That's part of why I use a Bayesian approach rather than a frequentist approach, because we're using the one condition we have, and then we're using the two different hypotheses to compare. Because even under a frequentist approach, I think the anthropic principle objection kind of fails, because something like the firing squad analogy. So, like, for example, you have a guy that's sitting in front of a firing squad of 100 trained marksmen. He hears a rumor that they're going
Oh,
to,
is it okay if I interrupt you?
yeah,
Okay. I think maybe this will help you understand why I'm sort of getting iffy about this a bit more. So
okay,
Bayesian, and if we're applying a Bayesian analysis here, my
yep,
understanding of this is relatively loose. I have some formal education where I've covered this as a topic before, but it's not like something I studied in great detail. It's like I took a test on this kind of stuff a couple times.
mm-hmm,
Uh, we use that model when we have like a lot of statistical data in order to work off of. So we have many examples of things happening, and over time we learn to associate certain conditions with increasing the likelihood of questions we might not to investigate or not. I feel like the sort of structure of this scenario sort of takes off that important prerequisite for in order to do a Bayesian analysis. Let me explain what I mean a bit more in order to make my objection really clear.
mm-hmm,
So imagine if we could somehow look at, okay, well, we're stuck with one universe, right? We're just talking about a single universe.
yep,
Ideally, if we're looking at something through a Bayesian lens, I would feel like we want to be investigating many different instances of things and looking at many different scenarios and then seeing what correlations appear. But we only have one universe.
see, that's
And
frequentism,
likewise, if
not
what if
Bayesianism.
we how about I'm going to run through my objection a little bit more so I can make sure you understand me, and then I'll be able to better appreciate
Okay,
the level of engagement you're
go
gonna
ahead.
bring to my question. So we only have one universe. So immediately I feel like, man, this doesn't really seem like the right place to apply a Bayesian sort of analysis. But taking it a step further, let's imagine we didn't have just one universe. Let's imagine we could somehow step outside of all this, get a God's eye view or something like that, and see many different universes. This is where my anthropic principle sort of objection comes into play. We wouldn't be able to see, well, from where we are right now, for all we know, what if there were a whole bunch of other universes that we just can't examine because we don't have that level of power or intelligence? And what if we were to have that power and intelligence? What if we could see that a bunch of them actually weren't life permitting? It's just that because we're life, we exist in the ones that are life permitting by necessity. Uh, if that were the case, there would be a whole bunch of information that we don't have access to, and that would actually show, per the analysis, that perhaps naturalism would be more reasonable because we'd say, wait, hold on, we're in a god. If the God permitting universe actually doesn't match up now that we have all of this information. Because there's a bunch of universes that don't have life, but if God is creating all these things with his purpose, and we're making all these assumptions that God would create life, then there should be life in some of these. Does that give you a better idea of where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I see what you're coming from, but this is not going to affect the argument from a set. Like we can use the one data set we do have, or we can use the multiple that's available. In this case, we have the one. Now, like if
Can we though? I don't know this part of Bayesian analysis very well. Maybe you
well,
can explain
all
to
we're
me.
doing,
Is it really right to be applying it to a single instances where we don't have any other data to first like refine our models off of?
well, this is our, we don't, frequentism is what we can use when we have multiple instances. When we don't, Bayesian is really our only approach that we have. So
I
now,
mine.
when you get into
I'll let
probability
you continue.
theory, there's more depth that you can get into in this, and I am no probability theory expert. Um, there's
Me
somebody
neither.
there's a philosopher named Trent Doherty who's pretty big on this, and there's other people too. It seems like a lot of philosophers of religion, especially, have gone this Bayesian route, and I've tacked on to that because of them, because I think it's a valuable way to have a more humble approach to apologetics rather than just use the deductive arguments. I'm trying to pull up my actual worksheet that I have where I have my Bayesian
Sure.
argument written out. So when I
Yeah, don't
say
sweat.
life permitting universe, like we could specify it to a
Mm-hmm.
specific condition of possible, like the cosmological constant, for example. There are possible positions that the constant could be in, but the one that we're in is the one that's needed for life to be, right? At least how we realize it. So
Okay.
if that's the case, I don't know if I
Well,
can.
that at least where we realize it part, that's a pretty big at least.
Yeah, but we don't have, like, to anything else. As far as we know, we have no reason to believe otherwise. So it's possible that new data could come in to show otherwise, right? And that would harm this argument. But until new data is presented, we don't have reason to believe otherwise.
I don't like applying that idea here because I feel like the grand scheme of all possible ways that life could have, or that something that we might consider to be, like life could exist in any possible universe. We don't know anything about the entire scale of all possible universes. All we have is the single universe that we do have. So I feel like to say,
Right.
well, we don't until new information comes in. I feel like we've grasped what could be an entire, like just a single speck of sand in an entire ocean. I feel like saying, let's just take this and generalize it until we have something else come in. That
Yeah, but
feels like
the
it's
problem is,
inviting a huge amount of room for error.
I see what you're saying, but the problem is the argument that you just made, like the whole grain of sand for the mass, amount on the beach, right? It could be though
Uh,
that grain of sand is the only grain of sand.
yeah, for
So
all I
like
know, it could be, but I
I could
also don't know. Hold on,
the
actually, hold
argument could
on.
be ran both ways. So I'm arguing from the data that we do have. So
We don't even know
that's
like
how.
what is possible. So we can take a single possibility, but if we haven't even examined all the other ideas of different possible universes, like do you think it's not possible for God to have created an entirely different framework of existence, of universes, of realities where life exists in some other form, but it relies on entirely different principles?
It's
I would
logically
assume
possible,
that it could
yes.
be very high, or maybe there just isn't, and this is the only way. I wouldn't expect this to be the only way, but I wouldn't. I feel like you're saying, well, if we're gonna go off just what we have, we should assume that this is pretty close to the only way. But that almost seems to cast doubt on God's ability to create coherent universes that would be amenable to life in many different ways, and that just sort of seems uh, like much more of an assumption to make than saying that we should just take at what it is and assume that there's very little else that it possibly could have been.
So again, I see where you're coming from, but the problem is we're just essentially creating one big argument from silence, or we're just posting things ad hoc. So, like, you
Well, I'm
could
not
do
saying it
that.
has to be this way. I'm saying that for all we know, it might be, and because it might be, I don't want to assume that I don't want to assume any of these. Uh,
Mhm.
and so for you to take, well, we're not assuming any of these, and now let's apply that. Let's try to create an argument that relies on probability. Uh, we like, man, I can't articulate truly the formally the way that that is wrong, but I feel like if I looked into it, maybe that would break some actual part of the probabilistic model that we're trying to build here. I mean, I this is probably gonna have to be something I look into on my own time. I don't
That's
want to
okay.
completely absorb it all in this one issue.
That's okay. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm just going off of the data that we do have. So if and remember, like, I
Yeah,
could just
and I'm gonna keep
change
on
the
being hesitant to
condition.
that unless you can like be really persuasive to me right here. But
Well, I can just change the condition, right? For example, so in my specific Bayes argument, I feel like if I share my screen, I'm going to already hinder. I'm going to try it here in a second, but as I'm trying to pull it up, I'm going to kind of walk you through what I'm talking about. Hopefully, you'll be able to see it on the screen here in a minute.
okay.
Let's see. Nope, that's not working. If I were to change the condition from the life permitting universe to be a little bit more specific, let's say, like, no, that's not it. We're going to look at something like, when we say life permitting universe, the cosmological constant to be a specific variable. Okay. And it has to hit this variable. We know it has to hit this variable in order for life to be. Otherwise, we couldn't. The universe would have, let's say, on our current Big Bang model, it would have like imploded on itself, right?
I feel like I'm sorry. I'm gonna butt in here because I feel like you're gonna give this to me, but it's gonna bump back into my same two objections, maybe to different degrees. But first of all, we don't know if given a bunch of if a bunch of the other constants were different, would this one constant being different then become permissible? That adds in a bunch of new scenarios where that variable could have been different by if the others being different in the right way would still allow for life to form. So we're missing a little bit there, but that's probably not as big of a problem as my issue from before, which is this still doesn't address that we're still not able to interrogate how many failed universes might potentially be out there and be able to like construct of like actual statistics that come from being able to see many different scenarios play out as opposed to trying to take probabilistic models that are meant to be applied across many different cases, but instead putting them on just this one reality that we have.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. You can't see my screen. Why isn't this working?
I
I guess
can't.
I can share it on YouTube, but I can't share it on TikTok. Whatever.
I will come around to the YouTube and look at this later, I'm sure. So if you just put it there.
I had it up for a minute, but anyways, I've gone over this Bayesian argument in many videos. Anyways, if we
I'm
just
sure.
look at the cosmological constant and we look at the rate, because basically, like, if you keep saying, well, it's possible it could be like this from a logical perspective, but there's no reason to believe otherwise outside of sheer skepticism. So, like, you can constantly do that, but I can do the same thing right back at you, and we're not going to get
Well,
anywhere.
hold on. Am I exhibiting sheer skepticism, or am I just pointing out that what I would expect to be one of the requirements of doing a Bayesian argument, that you have a whole bunch of that you have a pool of examples to pull from, and then you see how different properties of things in that pool relate to the odds that they meet some question or another. I feel like
No,
it's not me
that's
being
not what we
skeptical.
need
It's
for
me not.
Bayesian.
I feel like it's not. I feel like I'm not being. The problem is I'm not sure that the requirements in order to do a good Bayesian analysis are actually being met.
So that the purpose of Bayes, the reason I'm using Bayes as opposed to frequentism is because we don't
Hmm.
have multiple universes. So with a Bayesian formula, you have the standard formula, which is the probability of A given B equals the probability
Uh-huh.
of B divided by A, and the
Uh-huh.
probability multiplied times A divided by the probability multiplied times B. So in the upgraded formula I'm using for this one, it goes to the probability of the hypothesis, which design or theism,
Hmm.
we'll just say design for simplicity, So the probability of
Within
the
electronic universe.
design hypothesis, given the evidence, right, and then including our background knowledge, right? So the evidence is going to be the cosmological constant in our universe, and then our background knowledge is that the cosmological constant could have fallen under other values. And then the other one is going to be the probability of that we're going to compare it to the same, but take away the design hypothesis and just do naturalism. And so the question is, once we put the formula through, where are we going to get, right? And so the likelihood that, so you can read this with Luke Barnes and a couple other physicists that have come up with this number on what the cosmological constant is and like the likelihood range it could be. It's possible that it could fall under anywhere, like the current cosmological constant is 10 to the negative 120th Planck units. Okay. Or I think one of the new number now is 10 to the negative 123rd Planck unit number, right? It could have fallen a range from 10 to the negative 52 Planck units up to like 10 times over the negative 120 Planck units. But it didn't. If it did, then what would happen is, like, let's say it went too high, the universe would expand too fast and then would end up just like going into chaos, going into heat death really early, and then vice versa. The universe doesn't expand fast enough and then implodes on itself. Or like if you can imagine Big Bang model, like they usually look like a really wide funnel or balloon, and like when that happens, just rather than, and then the other way is just it goes too fast and then heat death. What they think will happen to us, a billion years from now or whatever, when we run out of usable energy. Nonetheless, so those are that's the background knowledge that's going to help us establish our priors. So maybe that's what you're talking about, adding the information like that. So this is going to be math that's going to be disseminated from physicists. Maybe that's going to help with the issue that you're bringing up.
Let's see. I mean, yeah, the truth is I'm going to have to look into this some more and make sure I understand exactly how Bayesian is being invoked here, because
Let me
haven't really
tell you
had...
the book I got this from, and maybe that can help. I got this from
Sure.
a book from the philosopher Michael Rota called Taking Pascal's Wager. It's not a long book. It's only maybe 150, 200 pages.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't make this up. I got this from someone smarter than me.
Well,
I
let
just
me
found
give
it convincing.
you some more ground to work with here, okay? So I'm gonna be generous and say your argument succeeds. Let's assume it succeeds. We'll say that we boost your probability. So at the very start of this, you said, well, let's say we start with theism at 50% and naturalism at 50%, and now we're going to use this. We're going to bump it up a little bit, and those odds are going to go up. Your argument succeeded, so now we're up to 65, 70, maybe say it's going to be 90, it's going to be 99. Now you have to walk it back down, and I know there are Bayesian things that you can do to walk it back later and get it to go back down. It is unfortunate that you probably wouldn't be able to give me an exact number on you. Yeah, you probably wouldn't be able to give me an exact number on any of these because
there are other parameters you and I would have to sit down and write and agree to. So that's why I don't give an exact parameter.
Yeah,
we'd have to say
agree on a bunch of
some
assumptions.
point higher, some amount higher.
Okay. So we get to it some amount higher. Now we've got to theism is a little bit more likely, but are there not things that could be applied to start bringing that back down? You've gone one subject. We've looked at one variable where it's gone up, given your argument. Permitting it succeeds. But we can also look at all of the other elements that we see of the world. So you chose two of them. You chose, well, at first it was life permitting, but then you sort of take a more specific version, which is the cosmological constant is such that the universe is able to be life permitting.
It's still the same, but yeah.
Yeah. If we go to something like,
yeah, you could go the route of like, okay, well, let's talk about.
Now we're gonna apply more, and some of these will go down, and we'll do it on the problem of evil now. And it's so unexpected, but we've got I don't want to take it there because I feel like if I was gonna do that to you, I would have to make a whole bunch of assumptions, and I wouldn't want to like force you to commit to these assumptions that I don't feel good about or anything along those lines. There's just seems like too much room for your own like personal biases to influence these assumptions. Like we have to choose these priors. Is it going to start at 50-50? Is it not going to? Is that appropriate? Is it not? We have to choose all these different assumptions.
The only way to be neutral
what
is to
result
start
we
at
get
50-50.
afterwards. Well, I don't really know if that truly is neutral. I mean, like you
What
said,
else would be
theism,
neutral?
but is there anything that isn't theism and isn't naturalism? If you say
Sure,
no, those are the
we
only
could
two
look at other
things,
hypotheses.
then
Yeah.
50-50 is correct. But then when we introduce other hypotheses, then all of these have to start like one third, one third, one third apiece, or something else
No,
other
no,
than
no. Well,
that. And
no, no,
I
no.
don't know
What you
what
would
the
do is
full
you would just
landscape would be for that.
what you would do is compare each of the hypotheses. I mean, you would just compare them each to where they all have an equal. So the 1/3 thing would be fine, or you could do the same with 10 different hypotheses, and they all be 0.1. That's fine. You
Hmm.
can't start at a 0 and just try to add one. You're not. I used to do that for simplicity's sake because people would say, "Well, where'd you get the 50-50 from?" And it's all you're
Hmm.
doing is just you're in Bayes. You have to use numbers. You have to start with positive numbers. You can't start with 0. There's a whole rule to that. I forget what the actual rule is, but nonetheless,
Hmm.
um,
No, I
you're
understand.
not
You can't
supposed
start
to
with
do
zero.
that. But the like, if you were to say, well, okay, well, why not polytheism, or why not an evil god?
Hmm.
Why not? Like, we would just do the same thing. So either way, I think that theism is going to win, particularly a classical or neoclassical theism model is going to win. Like here, I'll give you an example of how polytheism is going to fail. So if we were to look at multiple god situation versus one, the question is, well, if we
Hmm.
have one God that can answer all the questions, and then we have another hypothesis that has multiple gods that answers the same amount of questions, well, that would just violate parsimony. Why would we have a more complex hypothesis when the rule of thumb is, for both the field of science and philosophy, Occam's razor? If we have two
Okay, you apply
competing
Occam's razor.
hypotheses
Well,
that,
maybe you do that to solve other problems, like the problem of evil. There's multiple gods, they're fighting each other, they're not all in perfect terms, and then in that case, it's not just, polytheism is just, monotheism, but with extra steps. It's, no, it actually addresses some of these, Bayesian frameworks where we can set it up and look at, oh, well, if we're going to apply the Bayesian process to the problem of evil, we're going to have to penalize theism here, but we're going to have to give a bonus to polytheism here because it actually does hold up in that context. So I'm not sure that you can reduce it down in that way necessarily.
well, you can reduce per topic. So if we're talking about the condition of a life permitting universe, we rather expect that under natural or under polytheism as opposed to monotheism. Monotheism is simpler, so we have more reason to take the monotheistic approach than polytheism. You could say with the problem of evil, I would argue you're still going to have you're not going to have any better solution with polytheism. Um, but
Well, no,
nonetheless,
I'm pretty sure that this is not going to work out because we can take a Bayesian analysis and we
mhm.
can look at different factors. And when we take them all together, when we apply all of them, that will get us closer to the truth. But if we only look at some of them, then that can distort things. So let's set up a scenario. Let's say that I have a lightning rod on my house. When the power surges, it could be a normal power surge, or it could be lightning struck the lightning rod. And there's multiple different scenarios here. A scenario like that. Okay, so now let's say 60% of the time when the power surges and the window also closes automatically. I don't know. We just got to come up with something. And the window closes automatically. Well, our Bayesian framework already tells us that 90% of the time that happens, that means that lightning struck the lightning rod. That's not the only way that the power can surge, but in this framework, 90% of the time when those two things happen, then the result is going to be that it probably was the lightning strike. But then let's say there were a whole bunch of other factors that we just haven't talked about yet, like the cat's hair started standing up and yada yada yada. We expand to about 10 other different factors that we have to look at. Those factors might be so strong that they actually result that even if the window automatically closes, which would normally boost it to 90% if you were just looking at that as your first step or as the one factor. When we look at all of these together, even when you have that one strong factor going for it, when you take all of them together, because of just the way that the other factors panned out, that probability reduces back down. And oh, now a lightning strike hitting the lightning rod is actually a super slim possibility. It's
Mhm.
practically impossible because of other things that have ruled that out. To take that and apply that to your example, you said, well, given the life permittingness of the universe, we can look at this as one variable and then say, okay, theism scores well here, and then we're also comparing polytheism, but now we can subsume polytheism into theism because theism is just more simple. But there might be a bunch of other metrics that we should rightly have to look at where they perhaps polytheism and theism both do very well here, do very well in the life permitting universe one, but polytheism actually runs away with it once we look at all the other properties. You can't say, well, no, we should if we were to say no, we've looked at just this one, and in this case we can say that theism subsumes polytheism for being more simple. That's you can't stop there. You have a logical flaw if you stop there because you have a whole bunch of other factors you also have to consider.
Well, you could, like I said, you can go down that rabbit hole. There's nothing wrong with that. You could do that.
It would just be very hard and impractical, yes, but you could.
I mean, you could say
Yeah.
it's impractical, but let's say, like, the most important question is, what is the meaning of life? Or, like, what is the truth of life? If, like, the question is
Or
Christianity
is there a
true
meaning?
is an extremely important question. Because if it is, there's a lot riding on that. And then if it's not, well, maybe another religion is true, or maybe
I
there's
would
no true
I might
religion.
agree with that under some conditions, right? So there are questions that you could ask, like, am I just a brain in a vat, and the scientists are watching me, and if I don't be nice to my sister, they're gonna shock me with lightning, and then my brain in a vat life will be awful. There are questions like that where, because it's an unfalsifiable question, there's no way for me to ever prove that I'm not a brain in a vat. That's actually not a
I
question worth
don't think
considering,
that's
even though it
true.
might be of great significance. Yeah, go ahead and
When you
explain why you don't think
say,
that's true.
so you can say, maybe I can't prove that with certainty, but you could show that we have better reason to believe that we aren't a brain in a vat than we are. Like, I take more of a radical probabilist approach. There's only a few things that I take that I don't question, because if I do question them, I'm actually refuting myself in my questioning. So, like the cogito ergo sum, that's kind of
Yeah.
the coherence to that is,
Uh-huh.
you think, therefore you are. You can't say your cognitive faculties are not reliable, because the way you would know that is if you had reliable cognitive faculties. So it becomes a self-refuting argument. So there are some things. So for the brain in the vat example, like, it's
Uh-huh.
logically possible, but then we would try to give explanations as to why we should believe that and why we shouldn't. And I would argue that, you're going to fall into the camp. Most people are going to fall into the camp. We have a lot more reasons to believe that we aren't that than we are. And then you go into the reasons and you address them one by one. I mean, ultimately, this is armchair philosophy, man. This is what
Yeah,
philosophy
yeah, that's
folks do.
fine.
And I'm a huge philosophy guy. That's my
uh,
favorite academic discipline. I
I'm
think
still not
also
sure.
philosophy and
Mhm.
theology are the same in one. But go ahead.
I'm still not sure how we would ever be able to level any proof that you're not a brain in a vat. And the reason I don't worry
What do
about
you
that
mean
is
by
because
proof?
like there's just any justification to believe. I mean, ideally, my what I really like for proof is I would have that which comports to reality as adjudicated by a predictive power. So I'd say in science we can see that predictions can get made. There's the scientists can go and they can study the history of evolution and where the plate tectonics were, and then they can go to an area that would have been on the shore when life was evolving to come out of the ground, and they can say, wait, hold on, because we knew that the plates would be here this many millions of years ago, and we would expect an ancestor to come up here, we can go to there and we can actually look and see and try to find this precursor. And oh, look, we found it, and that's predictive power, and that's very valuable. I like stuff with that. There's no way I could get like something predictive that would demonstrate that I'm not a brain in a vat. But that's a very high standard of evidence. That's the standard I'd like to have. Like if you
Why
could tell
would
me
that
Christianity
demonstrate
has
you're
that
not a
standard
brain
of
in a vat?
evidence, that would be amazing.
Why
No, it
why would
doesn't. It
that?
doesn't.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I guess what
I
I'm
wish
saying
it
is,
could. I wish there
y-
was a way to make a prediction that would show that I'm not a brain in a vat. But as far as I can tell, it's unfalsifiable. There's no way to actually engage with the question. There's nothing that the question of am I a brain in a vat stakes itself upon, such that it becomes something that we can really investigate in a meaningful way. I want if the claim isn't
Hmm.
falsifiable, I don't see why I should take it seriously. That's the
So
reason I would dismiss it. But it sounded like you had a different reason for dismissing the idea that you're a brain in a vat.
what I'm saying is that there's not good enough reasons to believe. There aren't better reasons to believe that we are brains in a vat as opposed to not brains in a vat. Because
Okay,
the problem
like
is,
what?
so the problem is, I could say, well, instead of brains in a vat, why aren't we brains in a toilet, or why aren't we
Yeah.
schmains in a cup?
Yeah,
right? So we could just come up with these infinite amount of possible ad hoc situations
definitely. Yeah.
that can't be more probable than the other. And so then we go back to, well, here's the thing with the brain in the vat, and this is actually the same argument that I use against. I talked to you about metaphysical realism in the beginning of our conversation. So the classic battle in metaphysics is, okay, well, if I'm a realist, I think these forms and structures are real, they exist. If I'm a nominalist, that's the classical opposition position, they say no, these are all just mental fictions that we put names on. They don't actually exist. They're just things that we put names on. So with the brain in the vat feature, this means that everything we see, right, is a lie. It is a mental fiction. It's not real.
Basically.
Right? And so the very thought that we are a brain in the vat, or any other thought, is not reliable because it's a lie. So how do we know the thought that the brain is in the vat is not a lie if every other thought is a lie? We have no reason to trust our mind.
Well, we don't, but we also can't, we can't show that it's not that.
But I just gave you basically what I just gave you was self-refuting, like a self-refuting argument. Like essentially, you have to accept.
Well, it doesn't really refute itself.
Argument.
It's just not very productive, right?
You have
like
to
it would be counterproductive in order to
accept. Everything you believe is a lie. Everything that your mind shows you is a lie.
If I'm a person who believes I'm a brain in a vat, I would have to believe that everything except for that one belief is a lie.
but you see where the inconsistency is. So your epistemology goes out the window. And if your theory of truth, like the way you
it'd be
see
really
the world,
bad if I was a brain in a vat. So I do have to make certain assumptions. I will agree with you. I definitely have to make certain assumptions that lead to a practical life, because it just wouldn't be practical if I just lived my entire life thinking, oh well, or I hope it wouldn't be practical if I lived my entire life.
It's not even about practicality, though. It's merely just about what is more rational. So you can't be rational if you know that every thought that you have, every vision that you have, every experience, this is all a lie. None of this is real, and yet you believe it's real. Like you can't believe any of that is real and be rational. So basically, you have to believe and truly function as a brain of that, which obviously this is entirely anti-intuitive to all of human experience. So that's this is again, you run into this serious epistemology problem, which is why the brain in the vat problem was defeated in philosophy of mind, philosophy of metaphysics a long time ago. But it was still nonetheless a fun experiment to go over. But I guess what I'm saying is science is not the only way to truth.
So what are some other ways to truth? Because I want them to be very reliable.
There's philosophy, there's math, there's logic. Logic is actually a branch in philosophy, but science actually presupposes math and logic.
Some of those fall into the category of empiricism, right? Like I can empirically verify that 2 + 2 = 4. I can hold out 2 fingers on each hand and then I can count them up, and that would be relatively empirical on that.
Yeah,
those
but
grounds.
empiricism
are there
falls
some
into a similar
non-empirical
problem,
ways?
though. No, because empiricism, you can't empirically verify empiricism. That would be circular. So that's going to defeat.
So I do have to make some. Yeah, I do. I do have to take some assumptions, but I don't know. I don't think that defeats the value of empiricism.
Well, no, it makes it a self-defeating view.
I don't really understand.
You can empirically verify. You only believe things you can empirically verify, but that belief you cannot empirically verify, yet you believe it.
Well, the truth is, I don't only believe things that I can empirically verify. I do believe some things that I can't really empirically verify. Like I'm not a brain in a vat.
So then you're not an empiricist then.
I'm not a strict empiricist. I do see a lot of value in empiricism. Like if I was going to believe in something and I have empirical proof
but empiricism is
I really
that
like
view.
that.
So you're not an empiricist.
Well, hold on. I agree I'm not an empiricist. If you can take something and verify it empirically, I hold that belief in higher regard than beliefs that I achieve through non-empirical means.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. I too value empirical data.
Yes.
I'm just not an empiricist.
Yeah.
Nor am I a scientismist, or it's weird to say the word scientist.
So I'd be curious to know how else what other methods do you use to arrive at your beliefs? And should I use them?
That's why I just mentioned philosophy. Like I don't have to see anything. I could just do like what we're doing now, reasoning from the armchair.
Can you give me an example of something that I can know thanks to philosophy?
Like the law of non-contradiction. I know that I can both be.
Well, isn't that also sort of empirical?
No. This existed way before empiricism came out. Empiricism is a medieval
but I can
thing.
empirically verify it, right? So maybe it existed before people understood empiricism.
But I don't need to.
But I can, and so it's worth. holding in high regard for me. So maybe it'll be a better use of our time if you could find a different example that can only be reached non-empirically that I could feel confident in believing. That would be helpful to me.
Well, I'm just saying, literally, the law of non-contradiction. Like you could literally be so. Some people say things like the parrot consistent logic says that you don't have to have the explosion principle. But for example, I can't be Adam and not be Adam.
Yeah.
That would be a logical
I'm sorry. I
contradiction.
think I'm gonna have to interrupt you because I need to restate myself because I don't think you're seeing what I'm worried about.
Hmm.
So right now, I'm trying to think of because we're talking about basically epistemology here. How can we have good reasons for believing what we believe? And
Yeah,
what I've told you is I know that some of the things I know I can have good reasons for, and those are the things I can empirically verify. All right. I know that
sure.
that's one source to truth. I don't know what any of the other sources to truth are. I'm sure that some exist. There are some assumptions that I definitely have to make in order to even use empiricism.
Hmm.
I would like it if you could point out to me some things that I can't empirically verify, but that I can still feel confident in believing, because that would help me to build up a framework that isn't empirical so that you can then go on and prove whatever you want to about Christianity to me.
So that's like I had mentioned, the law of non-contradiction. The way I described it, I don't have to empirically verify whether I'm
You don't
Adam or
have
not.
to, but you
Right.
could empirically verify it. And
But
I
I'm
feel
saying
like
you don't have to. So
I
what I'm saying is you're
you understand why I'm asking for an example that you could give me of something I can know confidently that I can't get to through empirical means.
so that you can't get to through empirical means.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, you
because if
can't get to the
empiricism can
view
get
that
me to everything that I
you
believe in, then
can't
I
get to
should
the
just
view
rely
that
on empiricism.
empirical data is reliable. You can't
Okay,
get to
yes,
that
that
from
is one.
yes,
That is one.
yes,
So then
or can be
I've
reliable.
thought about this a little bit before, so maybe this is a good avenue for us to take the discussion down. There are some assumptions I have to make in order before I can even take on empiricist ideas. I have to assume, or at least I should assume, that my senses are maybe not 100% reliable, but they're at least not grounded in nothing. That's an assumption I have to make, and if I don't make that
Hmm.
assumption, then I'm pretty much dead in the water. I'm going completely crazy. But the problem with that form of knowledge is, first of all, I'm taking all knowledge as provisional still, right? I don't say 100% my senses are mostly reliable, or they're reliable no matter what. I'm saying provisionally speaking, I'm going to rely on this because it seems to result in the accurate prediction that I can use it to make my life better. It would be useful to me if you could, and so because I have that epistemological problem, I try to reduce the number of things that I take as fact in that way. I try to minimize the number of assumptions that I'm making before I can get to empiricism. But it might be helpful to you, or maybe you can get there on empiricist grounds or some other grounds, to be able to find other routes to knowledge or things that I can feel confident in.
Okay. Um, so as far now, to be quite frank, I'm pretty agnostic
Mhm.
on my epistemology position. I'm attracted to
Okay.
correspondence theory of truth. I'm attracted to coherence theory of truth. As far as like a mindset, I would say I'm more of from a metaphysics position, providentialist realist. So, I guess the question is, uh, if you were to kind of what I went back to earlier, when you look at things like what you had mentioned about you have to take some things to be true,
Yeah,
like for example, soft foundationalism, which is a position I pretty much hold, where
I
you
don't
would
know what that
affirm.
is.
You know what that means? You said.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. That just means that so hard foundationalism is where, or anyways, it's pretty much a form of affirmation of the cogito. So
Okay.
what you're doing is you're realizing the absurdity of refuting your own cognitive faculties because
Yes.
in order for you to think reasonably, you have to have such cognitive faculties in order to discern reason, right? And to figure out an equation, whatever,
Yes.
to answer a question, whatever, to coherently speak. So and then of course accept that coherent speech. So these are things that you have to take, and you're basically you're sitting in the armchair thinking about these. You're not
Hmm.
empirically verifying these. You're just you could be a blind person that has almost no access to senses, and all you can do is just think, and you're literally thinking, eyes closed, whatever, and you're able to come to these conclusions without access to your senses.
Okay.
So that would be some examples of things that you could come to conclusions about without empirical data.
But I'm trying to minimize the number of those kinds of assumptions that I have to make because I see them as assumptions. I don't really feel like I can I have to take them as provisional truth because for all I know, there's no way for me to establish that I won't someday have the rug pulled out from under me and be a brain in a vat or something along those lines.
Yeah, but that same thing could but remember, the brain in the vat piece would also destroy empiricism.
Yes.
So
Well, that's what I'm saying. As I'm saying, there's room for doubt in my mind that
it would
empiricism
destroy
is true.
empirical data, rather.
I'd agree with that.
We do want to be careful not to go down the route of solipsism.
I don't think anyone can solve the problem of hard solipsism, which is what the assumptions are there to avoid, right?
Well, the problem with assuming the problem of, again, it's going to go back to the same problem that I mentioned initially that I think does solve the problem, which is you would be affirming a bunch of mental fictions again. And if your brain is lying to yourself all the time, why would you trust the view that solipsism is true, but you wouldn't trust everything else that you see or that you comprehend?
Okay, hold on. I need to make sure I'm completely on the right track with you. Let's go over the meaning of the problem of hard solipsism again. So that's not the one where you're wondering if somebody else is conscious. This is you wondering if anything that you're experiencing means anything at all. You could probably state that better than me. You probably have more accurate idea.
Let me be concise here and pull up Stanford Encyclopedia.
Yeah, you can look it up because I would have to as well.
Because I don't really talk about solipsism a whole lot, but my understanding of solipsism, the hard problem is that nothing else exists but you. You cannot prove anything else exists.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay. That's pretty hard. That's a pretty hard problem.
Yeah, but that's
the
thing, though. Like, to make that assumption, you have to everything that your brain is let's, like, for the point of simplicity to not argue over philosophy of mind, I'm just going to use brain, though I think there's more than a brain going on. Nonetheless. Yeah. That means that your brain or your mind is lying to you constantly. All these fictions are constantly happening in front of you, and you're just this person that's trying to fight.
That's what it would
interacting with them because they're not real. You're like a person with, you're experiencing this insane form of schizophrenia that you can't control. So all this other stuff, everything you see is a lie, but the thought that everything that you see is a lie is not a lie.
Yeah, so just by chance. It's not a lie.
The data is, you're not using proper analysis when you're coming to that claim. I don't even know why I'm still looking at hard problem solipsism, because we've established we know what it means. But anyways, you see what I'm saying? Like, you're again going with that intuition. You're going against your intuitions. You're saying everything's a lie except for this one thought. We can say
that everything is a lie except for one thought, but that's not internally incoherent. Like that is a coherent opinion unto itself. And for all there is, if someday my entire experience just started unraveling, and it was revealed to me that as if it was possible that that I was just a brain and nothing else. Like that could still happen in a way that I can't prove that won't happen. I get what you're saying, that it's pretty fruitless to assume that it will. I would entirely agree. It's logically possible. Yeah. So in that sense, I agree that the problem of hard solipsism is unsolved. But
yes, it is logically possible, but the likelihood becomes very low if we were to put that into a Bayesian equation, right? Your prior would be super low, whereas the prior that everything that you see is not false would be much higher. Like, see what I'm saying? Like, you're just going against the grain. That. You're going against the grain really badly, because you're, like I said, you either have to affirm. Well, we've already been through this.
Whatever we would get it to, we would reduce that probability, and I would agree that the probability should be construed as low. But we never get that probability to zero. It would always be a probability.
That's, again, we don't have to have absolute certainty. We can take the radical probabilist approach. The radical probabilist approach, which I lean pretty heavily towards, which you can't take anything with certainty. Most things you can't take with certainty. I mean, you can't take you can't be certain that when you get in your car and start your car to go to work, that your car won't explode. You can't be certain, right? But normally when you start your car, that doesn't happen. And you've started your car, hundreds of times. The only time you've seen something like that happen is if there's a device planted under your car, or something like that, and you don't have any reason to believe that that's there. So the likelihood is very low. You would be very irrational to call your boss and say, I can't come into work today because I'm too scared to start my car because it might explode. Right. So the whole point is there is a reason. I don't know any philosophers, and I'll take the argument from authority or majority fallacy. I don't care. There's no philosophers that take the hard solipsism position. So this leads back to we cannot
we just can't solve the problem as far as I know. Yeah.
Well, we can't. I think we can solve the problem. Maybe not with certainty, but we can solve the problem.
Well, the uncertainty is the problem. We can solve it from a practical sense. But we can't reduce it to zero. And reducing that probability to zero is what I would consider to be solving the problem. So really, we're probably just quabbling about something we both agree on. In that
okay.
sense.
Well, anyways, the point of me getting to this was back to the whole because it seems like you don't accept the empiricism view, but you have kind of a skepticism view from an epistemological sense.
I see all truth as provisional. Like something could come back and convince me that it's wrong later. Is one way I would express that.
That's okay, but that's not the skeptical view. Is like pretty much I'm not skeptical. I'm skeptical that anything is really true. It's not quite the solipsism approach, but you pretty much don't accept anything, and you kind of take an agnostic position.
I agree with that insofar as anything could turn out to actually be false, as we established. But I agree that on the level of like the hard solipsism problem, where there's like a 0.0000 very, very small, eventually you get to a 1%, where it's very small, I can't completely rule that out as a possibility. So you're right in the sense I always leave a margin of at least around that much in everything that I believe. And everything I believe is like 99.99999, but then it stops eventually instead of actually reaching 100%. That's true in that sense.
Okay, well, what about math?
Like I can empirically verify that. 4. So my
yeah, but how do you know that your method
I know
of empirical...
it in the sense that I know anything else, which is that it's 99.9999, but it's never so great that, oh, well, solipsism is true, math was all just hallucinated. That could still happen to me, and I have to live with that. I think everyone has to live with that.
Okay. So it doesn't seem like you do hold to this full skepticism epistemological view then. So if that's the case, why such hesitation with the theism versus naturalism comparison we did earlier?
Because it doesn't feel very strong enough to me. Like I already said, I have a bunch of reservations about it. I would want to apply other factors, because if we stop at just one, like the window example from earlier, then we might end up, oh, well, if we look at only this one factor, it looks like 90%. But when you take all of them, which is what you should do if you're applying, it really completely, then you would end up at some lower value. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is I'm not sure you can set up the Bayesian analysis correctly unless you have more information than what we currently have, which is also something I leveled at you. But I don't want to get dragged into that muck. The value that I've sort of seen in our little back and forth about all of this solipsism stuff and what can we know and our epistemology and things along those lines is that I want to give you the opportunity to, do the point of the live stream, which is, figure out how I can jump the gap from being an atheist or an atheist in the sense that I'm not sure a God is even real, to getting to Christianity. But I don't think an empirical standard of truth would be able to get me there. So I need some other form of truth, and I was hoping you'd be able to offer that to me, which is sort of why I was asking you earlier, well, can you give me something that I can know and I can feel comfortable about with high certainty that is something I wouldn't be able to arrive at empirically?
Well, how would you do that? With the
I don't know. I'm hoping you know.
Well, so
I'm hoping
let me give you an example. So, like, you would then. All right, let me ask you: are you familiar with historiography or like the study of ancient history? Are you familiar with that field?
I'll know some facts about it, but I wouldn't say that I am familiar with it in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so would you say that so as from a historian's perspective, the most reliable form of evidence that they look for, the first thing that they look for, the best thing that historians can find to verify something, whether it's a person, an event, whatever, from ancient history, is eyewitness testimony.
Okay. Let me state some prefaces up here, because this will help you. If you understand them, this will help you to be more persuasive to me. Okay. If we're going down the resurrection trail, we're going to try to establish the resurrection. I'm gonna come at you with a point where if you're going to get me to believe something on the basis of testimony, and that thing is
Mhm.
going to be a miracle, then the state of the testimony being that way is going to have to be more miraculous than the miracle claim. I'm sure you've heard something like that before. So as you craft your upcoming answer or
Wait. Can you say that
your
again?
writing, okay, yeah. So if you're going to try and convince me to believe a miracle happened
Mm-hmm.
on the basis of testimony, it
Mm-hmm.
should be more miraculous for that testimony to be wrong than for that miracle to have occurred
I
in
see.
order
I
for
see
me to
what you're
believe
saying.
it. That's
Yeah.
really truism.
Yes. Really. I mean, that's just. Is it more likely that the miracle happened, or that there's some naturalistic explanation?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would think that a naturalistic explanation is by far more likely, but part of that,
Okay.
relies on your priors for
So,
miracles, which is
what
why we started in
naturalistic
the other direction in the
explanation
first
is
place,
far
which I
more
agree with.
likely?
Sure. So you've probably heard of like apologia. So I've watched some
Mm-hmm.
YouTube videos and I've heard of the minimal witnesses hypothesis. I would basically restate that for you if you want to like attack that. That's totally cool. I think we could have some fun with that. Or I can spell it out for you if you want to know what I believe and make sure that we get that hammered down first.
Go ahead, and I don't remember the minimal witness
Yeah.
hypothesis. Go ahead.
Yeah, so minimal witnesses hypothesis. So we're trying to explain the ending data, and I'm going to say what I think the ending data is, and you might quibble with that and say, no, it's something different later on. That's a valid topic to pursue. So the data we end up with is today we look at a bunch of old ancient texts that we have, and we have the early Christian community, and we have the Gospels, and we're trying to explain how do we get the Gospels that we have and the writings of the early church and the state that those were in and as we know them now, and also like when we were written, like we can estimate we had these writings by that time. How did we get to that scenario? Here would be my explanation for that. It would be that Jesus probably lived. I can imagine an alternative explanation. There's going to be a ton of other explanations. This is just one. I'll bring that back into my argument if it becomes relevant. One explanation would be Jesus lived, and then he died, and then his followers had some sort of grief hallucination. I would deny that they were mass hallucinations where they were all together, but I would probably believe that they were mass hallucinations before I would believe that it's a miracle. But we don't have to go down that route. That's not what the minimal witnesses believes. There were probably only about two actual disciples of Christ who would have had these experiences, and for all we know, they might be the only ones who stayed with the church. So that would be something like Peter and John were bereaved at the loss of Jesus, having seen him be uh, you know killed on the cross or what have you. They have these experiences as a result of being distressed, like we know people can have experiences from being distressed and claim to see their relatives after their death. And then they go on, and because of just the way that people thought about these sorts of experiences back then, where they took things like dreams and visions to have more truth than we would expect today. They went around and they said, I had an experience with Jesus and he's back and he's alive. And then it developed as a legend from there. And then you can add the Apostle Paul. He could have had some sort of experience where he felt really guilty for persecuting Christians. And you can add a few other little explanations here and there that sort of help keep the train rolling. But as far as I know, everything I've just explained to you is not incredibly unlikely, like in the realm of mass hallucinations. It's all naturalistically possible, and it would explain the data given some legendary development that happened in the many decades between when these events purportedly happened and the claims about them that were later committed to writing.
Okay. We would. So I probably disagree with the dating. I take an early dating of the synoptics.
Hmm.
Like we
Like
can
before
argue
70?
against. Huh?
Like before 70 AD?
Correct. Yeah.
Dang. Okay, well, I
The
don't know. Well,
the
here's the
arguments
problem.
that are for
I'll
post
let you keep
70
going
are
unless you want me to
pretty
finish.
bad. The majority of them ride on, well, Jesus made a prophecy. Prophecies aren't real, therefore they can't. They were after the fact. That's like
Well,
90% of the argument.
in order to really make
That's
the problem is you're
mhm.
looking at the latest something can go. So unless you have something that establishes that this writing couldn't have been any later than
Oh, I do.
69 AD or something like that, well then that might be something actually interesting to talk
Yeah,
about. You
so
probably
I'll,
are
I'll
catching me off
give you
guard
a
with that.
reason to believe that right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, would you say that Paul is the most popular of the apostles, with the exception of Peter?
Sure, I'll just grant that.
Okay. Uh, did you know, like, one of the most famous sayings of the church? It's said in Greek, but the English translation is the blood of the martyrs, the seed of the church. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of that.
Okay. Why
Or
wouldn't
at least I
Luke?
understand the point that it means. I actually probably
Right.
haven't heard those exact words, but I like agree with it as a rhetorical idea.
Sure. When did Paul die?
I don't think we know for sure when Paul died.
The latest would be 64 AD.
Okay.
Why
How do we know
wouldn't
that's the latest?
That's the source that we get. I think it's Tacitus who writes about Paul's death, or maybe
Okay, when's
Josephus.
Tacitus writing? Just so you know, this is this is probably how this conversation is going to go. Is I'm going to
That's
ask what
okay.
your source for these are. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Now, Paul's death is not like just that's not argued against in scholarship, even skeptics.
Well, he's a man. He had to have died.
Well, no, it's when he died is the question.
Okay.
So, but it's going to be in the 60s. So, Nero's persecution kind of gives us the time frame. So we have, let's see here. So, using a quick chat GPT, we don't know the exact date of Paul's death,
That's
but
fine.
historians can estimate by combining evidence from the New Testament, early Christian writers, and Roman history. So, the book. So, what my argument was that Luke
Yeah,
never mentions Paul's death.
yeah,
Acts ends with Paul's trial starting in Rome.
yes.
The persecution of his execution, the book never mentions the trial, the persecution. The book never mentions the persecution of Nero, which would be
Mhm.
pretty crazy not to mention. And that's what happened in the 60s, right? For them not to include that, and then Paul to be victim to some of this. And then, of course, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 is not mentioned in any of the Gospels. So
Yeah.
this is the
Well,
pillar of. You could try to say it's mentioned in Revelation, or you could even try to say some people try to say it's mentioned in John.
I'll let you get on with your point. Don't worry.
Nonetheless, but near the Great Fire of Rome occurred in 64 AD. Right, Nero blamed Christians for that.
Yeah.
Now, the early Christian tradition places both Paul and Peter's martyrdom during this persecution or shortly afterwards. You have Eusebius of Caesarea says Peter was crucified and then Paul was beheaded under Nero. They're getting that most likely for Peter being crucified upside down. That's actually in the Gospel of Peter, and that's obviously not canonical. Doesn't mean none of it's historical though. So I'm trying to
So
find.
there are two assumptions that your argument is hinging on. So let me state it again to
Well,
make
I
sure I
haven't
got it
finished.
right
I
before I
haven't
hang
finished.
myself
Hold
on
on.
it.
I'm trying to
Okay.
give you the Roman source here because I know there was
Okay.
was either Tacitus or Josephus who says when Paul died.
It's the argument they didn't know when Paul died, and so it had to be written before his death, and that's how you arrive at the dating.
I'm
Is that
going
what
to
you're
say it's
presenting
more
as me?
likely that it was written before Paul died than afterwards. Yes.
Okay, that is where I thought you were going with that. So you could probably guess. I'm going to say about two different responses to that. You can. Do you want to guess them? Maybe that'd be fun. What do you think I'm going to say about that? Because I don't think that's sound.
You could
I
say
can't
there's.
know that for sure. That's not definitive.
Well, you could say so, and yes, you could say it's an argument from silence, but arguments from silence aren't always bad. Like case example, if I'm sitting in this, 20 square or 20 by 20 100 square foot room or 200 square foot room, and I take a quick 360 around the room, and I don't see an elephant, and I say therefore there's no elephant in the room. Might be fallacious, but it's still true. Whereas if I do the same with the spider, right, that's fallacious and probably less likely to be true because it's good chance I wouldn't catch a spider just doing a quick 360 standing in the middle of a 20 by 20 room, right? But in this case, we have good reasons to believe that Luke would include the martyrdom of Paul because he was one of the biggest apostles to the church.
Well, I can think of
writing
some
letters.
alternatives to that. Right.
Okay, so what would your
Uh,
alternatives be?
yeah. So I'll state my two objections, and I'll also state, how it's possible that neither of those objections could apply. Okay. So the first one would be we're going to base the death of Paul on a whole bunch of assumptions. We're going to go back to Tacitus. We're going to see when he wrote, and at that point, we know it's tradition that Paul died at a certain time and in a certain way, that it was the result
Under
of the
Nero's
persecution under
persecution.
Nero. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if we buy church tradition, then that would be good, but we have to buy church traditions. That's an assumption that this relies upon. The other assumption that this relies upon is that if Paul died, it would have been put actually in the book, and you did identify this one. Good, you predicted it. I would elaborate on your reasons for it's not just the fact that it's an argument of silence, and I would say that this is a bad example of an argument from silence, but also their motivations why they might not want to talk about his death. Maybe the death just wasn't as amazing as leaving the dramatic note of wondering whether Paul went off to die, because it is a dramatic experience to get close to the end of Acts, and Paul is on his way to face his trial. And it really seems like, with all the persecutions going on, it's not looking good. What do you think is going to happen to him? And of course, church tradition is there in order to fill you in and let you know that, yes, Paul does eventually die when he gets there, according to church tradition. There's something compelling about that. There's something really artistic about that. That might be a reason why you might want to be silent in this case. So all those are points to detract from this, but I need to take a step back to really establish the significance of all this. I asked you for a reason to believe that the Synoptic Gospels could be dated would be before the destruction of the temple. I asked you for that. And you said, well, here's my reason. But in order to actually
here's
find
a reason, not the only
here's
reason.
a reason. Yeah, here's a reason. If you have a stronger reason, then you can bring that up to me afterwards. But just to make sure I punctuate this.
Well, let's
If we're going to say that if we're going to say that the latest this could have been written is X point, then there shouldn't be any assumptions that we can't check that would allow it to be dated to a later date. So in the scenario where they just thought it was dramatic to leave out the death of Paul, in the scenario where they didn't know about the death of Paul, but that's actually fake information because it just comes from distorted church tradition, both of these are assumptions that would lead to a later dating. So if you're going to say the earliest is that the latest this could have been written is at this date, that judgment is always going to come with assumptions, and I'm going to want to see if you're going to give me those assumptions are justifying having this dating before the destruction of the temple. I'm going to ask you, are those assumptions more miraculous, or would one of those assumptions being violated be more miraculous than actually the synoptics predicted the destruction of the temple? I would say no, the synoptics predicting the destruction of the temple would be more miraculous than either of those relatively...
But this is a priori assuming naturalism. And that's why I start with the argument of theism versus naturalism.
Oh yeah, I do understand that. Now, you can hold a non-naturalist view and still think that these probabilities are still not in your favor. Like, you could believe that there is some God, but it's just not the Christian God, and there can be miracles, but is it really more natural to assume that the one God that we aren't sure of is Christian or not actually intervened in this case and allowed them to prophesy about the destruction of the temple? Is that more reasonable than just they thought it was dramatic to not leave in the death of Paul? Is that more reasonable than the church traditions just got it wrong hundreds of years later?
I don't know why it would be more dramatic. Like, it would definitely be more dramatic to include the martyrdom of one of the biggest figures of Christianity.
Like, maybe it wasn't a very dramatic martyrdom. Like, what if it was just we didn't get to see his execution, they beheaded him, it was pretty fast and clean. But it's also not even up to us to judge, because maybe whoever was writing it just felt like it was more dramatic.
Hold on a second, because we mentioned we have a lot of other martyrdom accounts in church history.
You can attack this point over and over and over again, but you're never going to reduce the probability that what I'm saying is actually pretty realistic to be, less realistic than a miracle happened and the synoptics predicted.
Well, no. My reasoning is going to be less a priori than yours. You're a priori saying miracles are not likely to happen here. If God exists and God has a reason for a miracle to do that.
Because we have miracle claims all the time. And if I were to empirically judge those miracle claims, I'd be able to establish that the probability of a miracle claim not being correct is lower than the testimony being flawed or mistaken or an outright lie. So I don't have to accept a priori that miracles are so incredibly unlikely.
We have epistemology filters where we can test miracle claims.
What are some that you might use?
For example, there's this philosopher named Tim McGrew. He created this filter called DOUBTS. It's an acronym.
Okay.
I have to get off here in a second, so I'm not going to be able to go through the whole thing.
Yeah, we have gone pretty late.
what it does is he goes through like this criteria of like epistemology, how we can determine whether a miracle, because it kind of answers the question, well, if we believe that miracles are true, why not Muslim miracles, Hindu, whatever, and non-Christian miracles, right? It's more answering that question, but it applies here. So if there's a purpose for a miracle, like if somebody is to say, let's examine this claim we're talking about here, and then let's examine another claim where I say I had a purple dragon in my backyard yesterday, and we flew around the world for the heck of
Okay.
it and came back.
I think
Right?
I understand where this is going, but you can go on. Yeah.
Right. So you see, like, there's not going to be any value to that purple dragon. We're going to ask,
Uh-huh.
why would this happen? What came from this? And I said, well,
Yeah.
I just wanted to go really fast around the world, and I got on
It
this
doesn't really
hyper
make sense
speed
to take
dragon.
that prophecy as meaning anything because like the meaning of it just sounds random and silly. But I
Right.
don't think that maps cleanly onto my objection because even if we limit all of the miracle claims that we're going to assess to just ones that are whether or not they have meaning to them, even if we discarded, we
Mm-hmm.
threw out as bad evidence all of the miracle claims that are silly and ridiculous and they're just being made up by atheists to troll. I really earnestly think you'd probably be inclined to agree with me that you would still end up with more miracle claims that are mistaken or deliberate lies or in other ways false than miracles, even if they have some meaning that sounds, humanely significant.
I don't know about that, man. That's a lot of data
I
set to go through.
Yeah, that is a lot of data set to go through, but like if you want to broaden it out to Christian miracle claims versus other religion miracle claims,
Well, there's a difference
those other
between
religions
Christian miracle
do have
claims.
meaning behind them. They do have that sort of intuitive pull to them.
Well, hold on,
That
because we have to. There's a difference between central miracle claims to Christianity and something like Marian apparitions, right?
Okay,
They're not Marian apparitions. If they're false, that doesn't mean Christianity's false.
that's
If
true.
if central Christianity claims resurrection, things like, if that's false, Christianity is
Yeah,
false.
definitely. Yeah,
But anyways, it's almost midnight. I do want to get off so I can spend some time
that's
with my
fine.
wife before we go to church tomorrow
Yeah,
morning.
yeah. Thanks for
But
talking with me.
yeah, no, I appreciate you, and I hope
This
you
has
can
been
come back
fun.
on a Friday when I normally go live, where we can continue
Yeah,
this conversation.
well, that's good because I was going to ask, would you want me back? I'm glad this will be fun if we do it again.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because I feel like, and I've listened to I've actually had a conversation with Pelagia before on the line.
nice.
I found him. I've talked to many of the skeptics. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel of me talking to Matt Dillahunty.
I saw that earlier today.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
you saw how well that conversation went.
yeah.
The Pelagia I enjoyed speaking with. He
Yeah.
was respectful. He let me get my point across. Now, I was talking to him and Godless Engineer at the same time. Godless Engineer, not so
A little
much
bit more
so.
rowdy.
But I enjoyed talking to Pelagia, and maybe one day I'll talk to him again. But I think that there are some problems with this that we'll have to get into next time. I
That'd be
remember
fun.
now seeing this video. I think he was actually responding to, like, the reason he came up with this argument was to go against Jonathan McClatchy and Eric Manning's maximal case argument, which come from the McGrews,
Yeah.
which one of them I just quoted to you for the doubts filter. But anyways,
Yeah, I kind of cut you off on that, but yeah.
no, you're fine. I don't, because it's going to take me a minute to read through the whole
That's
doubts
true.
filter. But anyways, I'll let you go. I usually go live Friday
All right.
nights, not Saturday.
Okay.
So feel free to come back so we can continue this conversation, because I've enjoyed it and I'd like to continue it. So
Yeah, sounds like fun. I'll try to look into the Beijing stuff, and maybe we'll end up picking up there. It depends on how much time I have.
okay, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Thank
All
you.
right, man.
Enjoy
Thanks
your
for
night.
coming up. All right, Grant, you take
Yep.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All righty. Well, that was a good conversation. I enjoyed that. And thank you guys for all the love, the hate, the in-between, and the comments. God bless you too, Hawk. Appreciate the love, man. Billy, you as well. Love you, bro. Glad to see you here. Oh, I'm sorry, Objective Ethics. That was a response to Gary Habermas. Okay, I guess it was a response to the minimal facts then. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, the minimal term there. But anyways, as opposed to the maximal case. Either way, for my YouTube folk and my TikTok folk, thank you guys for paying attention. Thank you for staying tuned. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. Again, I enjoy having stimulating conversations talking about the biggest questions. Is Christianity true? Does God exist? This is the most important thing to ask. So nonetheless, I hope to see Grant back. And then for any of you who were waiting, I see I have young Deutscher in the queue. I'm sorry, I got to get offline here, so I'm not going to be able to bring you up. But nonetheless, love to all you guys, and I'll see you guys next time on Truth Over Tea. Have a great night. All righty, and my YouTube folks, thank you guys